Welcome back to Echo Base. The doors have reopened, and what was once under control is beginning to reform. In Season 2 of Echo Base, Arrival, the team returns, but something has changed. The shadows are deeper, the voices are clearer, and what lives between the walls has learned to listen. Share your theories, thoughts, or goosebump-inducing moments in the comments. And now, re-enter. But be quiet. The desert was silent. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that felt unnatural, heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. Mercer stood at the edge of the crater where Echo Base used to be. The ground was scorched black, the sand fused into glass. A twisted antenna jutted from the rubble like a broken bone. Ramirez sat on a collapsed dune, turning a dented flashlight over in his hands. Behind them, Voss stood alone, eyes fixed on the smoke still rising from the ruins. They had survived. Somehow. But they hadn't escaped. A rescue team had arrived 3 hours too late. The trio had been found wandering just outside the blast radius, disoriented, half-conscious, bloodied. They told the officials it was a reactor accident. A classified experiment gone wrong, containment successful. The team didn't press. The files were sealed. The cleanup began. Now, 2 weeks later, Mercer still woke every night thinking the base had followed them. Sometimes he wasn't sure it hadn't. Ramirez tossed the flashlight and stood, brushing sand off his fatigues. "I know this is your coping ritual, boss, but standing here isn't going to unburn the place." "I don't want to unburn it," Mercer said. "I want to be sure it stays buried." Boss didn't turn. "I keep dreaming about the hallway," she said, "the one that never ended." Mercer glanced at her. "You think it's still there?" "I think. Maybe we brought some of it with us." Ramirez let out a low, uneasy breath. "You guys need hobbies." They headed back to the temporary outpost a few miles away, a quiet installation set up by the same unnamed agency that had built Echo Base. This one was smaller. Above ground, still clean, still unaware. The sun dipped low, stretching shadows across the desert. Inside, the air was too cold, sterile, new. It didn't feel real. Voss sat at her workstation, reviewing scan data pulled from the crater. Most of it was noise, electromagnetic static, memory interference, unexplained echoes. But one file stood out. Mercer stepped behind her, watching over her shoulder. A signal, weak, but present, repeating in short bursts. The same frequency used by Echo 3. "That's not possible," Mercer said. "I scrubbed it 3 times, Voss said. "It's not a glitch, it's real." Echo 3 was destroyed with the base. "Unless," she said, "some part of it survived in the transmission field." "The memory." Ramirez leaned in. "Let me guess. It's calling for help." Voss didn't answer. On the screen, the message repeated again. Ramirez frowned. "That Morse?" Voss nodded. "Just me a back door." Ramirez blinked. "That's not a sentence." "It is," Mercer said, "if something's trying to get out." They stared at the screen for a long moment. Then Voss leaned forward, isolating the origin trace. "It's not coming from the crater." Mercer stiffened. "Where, then?" Voss tapped the screen. "A secondary facility, one I haven't seen before, registered in the original Echo archives. Shut down, years before the main base was constructed." "Name?" Mercer asked. She hesitated, then read it aloud. "Site 27B, back, codename Hollow." The word hung in the room like a warning. Ramirez was already shaking his head. "Nope. No, I know that tone. That's the tone that gets us sent back underground." Mercer said nothing. He just watched the signal repeat, steady, pulsing like a heartbeat. He had the feeling something was watching them back, waiting. And it remembered them. The road to Site 27 Bravo didn't exist on any map. Mercer drove in silence. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction. The sky was a flat, heavy gray, clouds pressing low like something watching from above. Behind them, the temporary outpost had disappeared behind the dunes, just another forgotten scar in the sand. Voss sat in the back seat, eyes locked on her tablet. Ramirez rode up front, boots on the dash, chewing his third piece of gum in an hour. "You know," Ramirez said, "we blew up a place called Echo Base. Now we're headed towards something called Hollow." "Who names these places? Depressed poets?" "No one's forcing you to come," Mercer replied. "Sure, but if I let you two go alone and you vanished, I'd end up doing the paperwork. That's a worse fate." They turned off the road onto a narrow trail that looked more like erosion than infrastructure. The terrain got rougher, the sky dimmed unnaturally. A rusted sign appeared, nearly swallowed by sand. Faded lettering read, "Site 27 Bravo, terminated. Do not enter." "Terminated," Ramirez muttered. "Not closed, not decommissioned, just ended." The road stopped abruptly. A blast gate stood before them, half buried, silent and sealed. Around it, the land felt wrong, as if time had passed everywhere except here. The concrete walls weren't crumbling. The steel hadn't rusted. It looked untouched. Voss approached the access panel. Dust fell from it like dry skin. She plugged in a cable from her tablet, fingers moving fast. After a pause, the panel blinked green. The gate opened with a heavy mechanical groan. A wave of cold air spilled out. It wasn't the stench of rot. It was memory, dead, sterile, and preserved. They stepped inside. The lighting flickered to life slowly, one panel at a time, revealing a narrow hallway that led downward. The design was older than Echo Base. No polished walls, no clean structure. Everything was stone, concrete, and thick metal. "This isn't military construction," Voss said. "It's deeper, older. Feels like a bunker built under a bunker," Ramirez added. As they descended, the air grew cold. The silence became heavier. Voss tracked the signal that had drawn them here. "It's repeating the same line over and over," she said. "It says, 'Get it out. We are still here.'" Mercer didn't answer. The hall opened into a corridor of identical rooms. Cells, maybe, each with a slab. Some had old IV lines hanging from the walls, others had nothing at all. Then one door blinked red, locked from the inside. They drew weapons. Mercer opened it slowly. The room inside was dark, except for a single screen flickering with static. A chair sat beneath it, and in the chair was a figure. Slumped. Still. Human once, but barely now. Its body was thin and sunken. Wires ran from the back of its skull into the wall. The monitor pulsed. A message appeared on the screen. Awaiting reconnection. Voss stepped closer. "This was a receiver station," she said. "They were feeding something into him. Or maybe pulling something out." Then the screen changed. Reconnection initiated. The walls vibrated, the body twitched. Not alive, not dead. Mercer stepped back. Voss's voice was barely a whisper. "It's still here." The body in the chair didn't move again, but something in the walls did. Mercer stepped closer, the air around him tight with static. He could feel it, the way your skin prickles before lightning strikes. The monitor beside the body still glowed softly. The words had stopped scrolling. Now it just displayed one line, over and over. Awaiting signal source. Voss moved to the wall panel where the wires connected. She pried it open carefully. Inside, the cables weren't just electrical. Some were organic. They pulsed faintly, like veins. "This is beyond anything Echo Base ever used," she said. Ramirez stood near the door, keeping watch. He didn't like how quiet the hallway had gotten. The silence had a shape to it, like something standing just out of view. "You're saying this guy was the antenna?" he asked. "No," Voss replied. "He was the interface." She pointed to the wall. "This whole facility, it was designed to receive something, not from another base, from somewhere else." Mercer didn't respond, and he was staring at the man's face. Or what was left of it. The skin had receded. The eyes were gone, sockets black and deep, but the mouth hung open slightly, like he had been caught mid-sentence. Like he had never stopped speaking, only been silenced. Voss powered up her scanner. Something is still active beneath this room. A deeper layer, more signal sources, and... She hesitated. Mercer turned to her. What? She looked up slowly. There are 6 other receivers. Still online. Ramirez straightened. Wait, you mean like him? She nodded. Not in this facility. Spread across different coordinates. And they're broadcasting, weak but active. Mercer stepped back. Where? Voss showed him the map. One in Greenland, one under the Indian Ocean, another deep in Siberia. 2 inside mountain ranges we don't even have names for, and one, she paused, and one directly beneath a civilian city. Ramirez stared. Someone built more of these things? Voss shook her head. No, these weren't built, at least not recently. The architecture, the code, it's older than Echo Base. This place didn't create the signal. It was just the first to answer it. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then the monitor blinked. The screen changed. A new line appeared. Connection found. Mercer's blood ran cold. The lights in the room dimmed. The walls seemed to pulse. The body in the chair twitched again, just once, like something was pulling a string inside his spine. Ramirez raised his weapon. Don't move, he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was talking to. Voss backed away from the monitor. This isn't a playback. It's live. The body turned its head slightly. Not all the way, not naturally, but enough. Enough to look at them. Mercer stepped forward, his voice low. Who are you? The mouth moved. There was no sound. But the message appeared again on the screen. We never left. Then the monitor died. The room went dark. Mercer turned on his flashlight. The chair was empty. Gone. Voss was already pulling the scanner back online. No signs of movement, no trace, just... gone. Ramirez swore quietly. Okay, new rule. If something sits still for more than 20 years, we don't talk to it. Mercer didn't answer. He was still staring at the empty chair. Something had awakened. Not fully. Not yet. But enough to know their names. Enough to find its way back. They didn't speak much on the way back to the outpost. Ramirez drove this time, hands tight on the wheel. Voss sat in the back seat with her tablet balanced on her knees, scanning through layers of encrypted data. Mercer watched the road ahead but saw none of it. His thoughts were still in the dark humming chamber below Site 27 Bravo. They had seen something, spoken to something, or something had spoken through what remained of a man long dead. By the time they reached the outpost, the desert sky had turned the color of old ash. Wind blew sand in slow spirals across the concrete landing pads. The building looked smaller now, less like shelter, more like a box waiting to be buried. Inside, Mercer dropped his gear without a word and headed straight for the command console. Pull up everything we have on the other sites, he said. Voss plugged in. The screen filled with maps, coordinates, blinking signals. All 6 receivers are still active, she said. Whatever linked to Hollow, it's reaching out again, but not evenly. The activity is moving. Like a search pattern, Mercer said. Like a signal crawling across the planet, Voss corrected. Ramirez sat on the edge of the desk, arms folded. You're saying these places talk to each other? They don't just talk, Voss said. They resonate. When one wakes, the others feel it. And now... They're responding? She tapped the screen. A blinking dot expanded. The one under the civilian city. This one's getting louder. Mercer leaned closer. What's the location? Southern Finland, Voss said. Small town, not a military zone. No labs, nothing officially connected to Project Echo. But something's there, Mercer said. Ramirez glanced between them. What? We pack our bags for Europe? What are we even looking for? Mercer stared at the map for a long moment. Whatever came through at Site 27, it didn't arrive alone. I think we only saw a splinter, a thread." He looked at Voss. "You said it was searching. What if it's looking for the rest of itself?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ramirez stood. "Okay, but if this thing is moving through signals, if it's some kind of conscious frequency, how do you even fight that?" Mercer replied quietly. "You don't." He pointed to the data stream. "You find where it's trying to surface, and you stop it before it does." Voss brought up satellite overlays of the Finnish site. No unusual energy readings, no seismic activity, no direct transmissions, just a forest. Endless pines stretching over hills of frozen ground, but buried beneath it, deep beneath it, a faint trace, another receiver. Mercer made the call. "We leave it done." Ramirez gave a slow nod. "Just like old times," he muttered, but no one laughed. The desert wind howled outside, brushing against the walls like fingertips. Behind them, the monitor pulsed once, then stopped. The forest was silent. No wind, no birds, just the crunch of boots on frost-hardened ground. Mercer led the way, rifle slung across his chest, eyes sweeping the tree line. The pine trees stretched tall and narrow, branches motionless. Their trunks formed tight rows, too symmetrical for comfort. Voss walked just behind him, scanning with her tablet. Ramirez brought up the rear, carrying a portable transmitter and muttering under his breath. "I've been in war zones that felt friendlier," Ramirez said. "This isn't a war zone," Voss replied. "No," he said, "it's worse. Nothing shooting at us, it's just watching." The forest path ended abruptly at the edge of a wide clearing, dead leaves crunched underfoot. At the center, barely visible through moss and snow, a rusted metal hatch sat half buried in the earth. Mercer knelt beside it. No lock, no keypad, just a circular handle, cold to the touch. Voss held out her scanner. "There's something down there, not mechanical, not biological, but present." "Echo signature?" Mercer asked. "Yes," she said, "like a memory that hasn't faded." He turned the handle. The hatch groaned open, releasing a wave of air that smelled of copper and wet stone. A narrow tunnel descended into the dark. No lights, no signs, just an open mouth in the earth. They climbed down slowly, flashlights cutting long shadows across the walls. The passage was tight, the stone reinforced with old metal beams. Water dripped from above in steady rhythms, like a clock ticking underground. After 20 meters, the tunnel opened into a chamber. It was empty. At first glance, then Voss swept her light to the right. A door stood in the far wall. Newer than the rest, marked with 3 vertical lines carved deep into the metal. No labels, no locks, just the mark. She stared at it, unmoving. Mercer stepped forward. "You recognize that?" "I've seen it in Echo Base archives," she said. "Not in the public files, only in buried sublayers." "What does it mean?" Ramirez asked. "Nothing," she said quietly, "and everything. It's the original symbol for Project Echo, before the base existed, before the name." Mercer touched the door. It opened without a sound. Inside, another room. Small, circular, with a single chair in the center. On the far wall, a screen blinked to life. Text appeared in plain white letters. "Observer connected." The lights dimmed. The floor vibrated. A low hum filled the air, not heard but felt, like the memory of a sound instead of the sound itself. The screen changed. "You arrived late, but you were expected." Mercer stepped closer. "Who are you?" The screen answered. "Not who. When." Voss whispered, "It's not a consciousness. It's a pattern." The walls began to shift, faint pulses of light moving like veins beneath the metal. "You left the door open. Now it remembers." The hum deepened. Something stirred behind the wall, slow, massive, and hidden. Ramirez aimed his weapon, but there was nothing to shoot. Mercer turned to Voss. "Can we shut it down?" She shook her head. "There's no system, no power source. This place is running on something else. The screen flickered. What is remembered becomes. Then it shut off. The hum stopped. The lights died, and from behind the door they'd entered came the sound of breathing. They didn't sleep that night. After leaving the underground chamber, Mercer's team camped in a temporary structure set up just outside the forest. The hatch had been resealed behind them, but that didn't stop the feeling that something had followed them out. The wind never stopped. It didn't howl. It whispered. By morning, Voss had isolated a name from the old Finnish archive, buried deep in the files attached to Site 27 Bravo, a single civilian listed as survived contact. No follow-up, no further notes, just an address 200 kilometers away. Mercer didn't hesitate. They packed up and left before sunrise. 2 hours later, they pulled into a narrow driveway outside a faded yellow house at the edge of a frozen lake. The windows were shuttered. No vehicles, no movement. But someone was home. Ramirez stayed outside, scanning the area. Voss and Mercer approached the door. It opened before they could knock. An old man stood there wrapped in 2 layers of wool, his eyes pale and distant. He looked at them without surprise. "You're from the base," he said. Mercer nodded. "We need to ask you some questions." The old man stepped aside without a word. Inside, the house was simple. Cold. The air smelled of dry wood and something metallic underneath. Photos lined the hallway, but every face was scratched out, every frame broken. Not smashed, just cracked in one straight line through the eyes. They sat at a worn table in the kitchen. The man poured 3 cups of black coffee. He didn't speak until Mercer did. "You were listed in the records, said you survived contact." The man nodded slowly. "My name was Elias," he said. "I don't use it anymore." Voss leaned forward. "Can you tell us what happened?" Elias stared out the window. "There was a door in the woods," he said. "We thought it was just an old bunker. Some of us went inside, some didn't come out." Mercer waited. Elias continued. "But something did follow us. Not physically, not then, just awareness, like an echo of something that had once been a person." He paused, eyes glassing over. "And then it started talking." "Talking how?" Elias tapped his head. "Here." "Not out loud. Just memories. Things you'd forgotten. Things you never wanted to remember. But they weren't mine." He looked up. "They were someone else's." The room went still. Elias's hands trembled slightly as he reached under the table and pulled out a notebook. Its cover was frayed and soft from years of use. He slid it across the table. Mercer opened it. Inside were drawings, symbols, maps, repeating phrases. But they weren't in any known language. The letters twisted mid-page, words looped into themselves, and images of places that didn't exist. Rooms made of mirrored walls, people without faces, something vast sleeping under a mountain. Mercer stopped on one page. It showed Echo Base, drawn long before it was built. Elias's voice was quiet now. "You can't stop it. Not by sealing doors or destroying walls. It doesn't need space. It needs minds." Voss asked, "Then why are you still alive?" Elias smiled faintly. "Because I stopped remembering." He tapped his temple again. "It can't hold what you forget." The wind pushed against the walls, groaning like an old ship lost at sea. Mercer closed the notebook and looked Elias in the eye. "Will you help us?" Elias didn't answer. He just stood and walked to the door. Before stepping outside, he turned once more. "If it speaks to you, in your own voice, don't answer." Then he disappeared into the trees. They drove in silence for a long time after leaving Elias's house. The notebook sat closed in Mercer's lap. He hadn't opened it again. He didn't need to. The sketches, the symbols, they were burned into his memory like scars. The air inside the vehicle was heavy, thick with the weight of what they had just learned. Voss finally broke the silence. He wasn't lying. Mercer didn't look away from the road. Field here. They all finished their coffee. I know. I scanned the notebook, she continued. There's a pattern beneath the drawings, a repeating loop in the ink density, like a signal embedded in the paper itself. Ramirez turned in his seat. You're saying he was transmitting through handwriting? I am saying, Voss said, that whatever touched him, it left fingerprints, mental ones. They drove through the afternoon and into dusk, arriving back at the outpost as the last light faded over the trees. The moment they stepped inside, Mercer stopped. The temperature had dropped, lower than it should have. The lights flickered once, then stabilized. Ramirez walked ahead into the hall. Generator must be glitching again. But Mercer didn't move. Something was wrong. The air smelled like the chamber below Site 27 Bravo. Copper, dust, old water, and static. Voss noticed it too. Her eyes narrowed. Something's inside. They moved quickly, through the hallway, into the operations room, and froze. The monitors were on, all of them. Each screen displayed a different room inside the outpost, but they were empty, except one, the hallway behind them. They turned just as the light at the far end of the corridor flickered and died. Footsteps echoed, slow, heavy. Mercer raised his weapon. Hold your ground. But nothing came. The light blinked back on. The hallway was empty again. They turned back to the monitors. Every screen now displayed the same image. A door, simple, unmarked, set in a black concrete wall. Not a room in the outpost. Not any room they recognized. Yet somehow, it felt familiar. Voss scanned the feed. No external connection. This isn't a camera. Then what is it? Ramirez asked. She looked at Mercer. A memory. The screen flickered. The door opened. A dark room beyond. Mercer's head snapped back slightly. He was no longer standing. He was sitting, alone, in the chair from the underground facility. Except this time he couldn't move. He looked down. His hands were gone. Just light. Just static where fingers should be. The walls breathed around him. Then a voice, not spoken aloud, inside his head. His own voice. Soft. Calm. You let it in. He tried to move. Tried to scream. But the voice only grew louder. You remember wrong. That's how it started. Images flashed across the walls. Faces he didn't recognize but somehow knew. A woman crying. A soldier bleeding in the snow. A hand reaching for him in a fire. Then another voice, not his, colder, older. You are not the first, you are not the last, but you were the loudest, he gasped. Blink. He was back, standing in the operations room. Ramirez had him by the shoulders. Mercer, you blacked out. Voss looked shaken. That wasn't a hallucination. You disappeared, you were gone. Mercer swallowed hard. They pulled me into something. A memory, Ramirez asked. Mercer shook his head. A room. He turned toward the monitors, but they were blank now. The lights stable. The air warm again, as if nothing had happened. But something had. It had found its way in, and now it knew how he thought. They sealed the outpost before sunrise. Steel shutters locked over the windows, internal signals were cut, every satellite uplink was disabled, power rerouted to analog systems only. No network, no radio, no contact. Voss called it the Silence Protocol, a last resort defense meant to break external influence by shutting down everything that could carry a signal. Mercer stood in the dim main corridor as the last relay went dark. The air had changed again. Still cold, but no longer watching. Feels like we buried ourselves alive, Ramirez muttered. That's the point, Voss replied. If it can't hear us, it can't enter. Mercer nodded, but said nothing. He hadn't told them everything about the memory room. The voice that spoke through him, in him, hadn't been content with watching. It had been searching, not just through his past, but through something deeper. Intent, regret, desire. It wasn't feeding off information, it was feeding off identity. Ramirez paced the hallway, flashlight sweeping slowly across the walls. "How long do we stay locked in?" "As long as it takes," Voss answered, "until we can isolate and trace where it came from. Or until it tries something new." "Great," Ramirez said. "Let's hope it's the first one." That night, they took turns on watch. No one really slept. At 3:17, something tripped the emergency power loop. The lights blinked. Twice. Then held steady. Voss checked every panel. No breach, no faults, no visible power surge. Yet the temperature had dropped again. And down the far corridor a low hum had returned, not mechanical, not electrical. A presence. Mercer followed it, slowly. The hallway narrowed near the old comms room, a place they hadn't touched in days. Inside, everything remained as they'd left it. Dead consoles, disconnected wires, blank monitors. But one screen was on, no image, just white light. Mercer stepped inside. The door closed behind him. He turned and saw his own face on the screen. But it wasn't a reflection. It was watching him. Expressionless, still. Then the lips on the screen moved, not in sync with him, not with any sound, just motion. He heard no words, but he felt them in the base of his skull. An invitation, not a command, not a threat, just a door opening. He stepped forward. The air rippled, and then darkness, silence. He was no longer in the room. He stood in a corridor he didn't recognize, walls of smooth black stone, no seams, no light source, yet he could see. Ahead, 7 doors, each identical, each labeled with a name. The first door said Mercer, the second, Voss, the third, Ramirez, and the next 4, blank. He stepped closer to his door. The moment he did, it opened on its own. Inside, a memory, but wrong. Twisted. He saw himself standing over a fallen comrade, blood on his hands, not from a mission, from something else. Something no record had ever mentioned. He staggered back. The door closed. From behind him, footsteps. Ramirez's voice, but distant. "Mercer! Mercer, wake up!" And then he gasped. He was back in the comms room, on the floor, sweating, shaking. Voss stood over him, pale and panicked. "You were gone for 6 minutes." Ramirez stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. "We shut everything down. We shut it all down." And it still got in. Mercer sat up slowly. "It doesn't need a signal anymore." Voss froze. "What does it need?" Mercer looked at them both. "It just needs us." The outpost remained sealed. But silence no longer meant safety. Something had changed after Mercer's encounter in the comms room. The walls felt closer. The shadows lingered longer. And the silence wasn't quiet anymore. It pulsed like breath held too long. Voss had found a lead, a single frequency, still clean, still uncorrupted. Not a transmission, but a gap in the signal storm, a place where everything else was absent. A blind spot in the data stream. She called it the empty. "I think it's where the entity can't reach," she said, "a dead space in the pattern, almost like it's afraid of what's there." Ramirez leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the map. "Looks like a frozen communications relay." "It was shut down 30 years ago," Voss said. "Classified, then buried. But this says it restarted 5 days ago." Mercer spoke quietly. "Coordinates?" "Greenland," she said, "near the old polar research ring." They moved fast. Within 12 hours they were airborne, heading north over Black Ocean and broken ice. The closer they got, the more unstable their instruments became. Static, ghost readings, sudden resets. It wasn't interference. It was warning. They landed in near-total darkness. Arctic twilight stretching the same color in every direction. Wind howled across the icy cliffs, the air bitter and sharp. The facility was buried under permafrost, but the entrance was still intact. A steel tunnel dug into the ice, crusted over with frost. Their flashlights struggled to cut through the swirling cold. Inside, the walls were old, mid-century design. Manual systems. No automation. No digital footprints. Mercer exhaled a cloud of steam. No echo tech, he said. That's why the signal can't reach it, Voss replied. This place was built before the entity ever came online. Ramirez brushed frost off a rusted door. Then what restarted it? They entered the main relay chamber. Rows of consoles, all analog. Gauges, dials, tape reels. A single green light blinked slowly in the center of the room. Alive, waiting. A voice spoke from the corner, calm. Human. I was wondering when you'd come. They turned. A woman sat at one of the control desks. Middle-aged. Pale. Eyes too still. She didn't look surprised. Mercer raised his weapon slightly. Who are you? The woman smiled. I used to be someone else. I don't remember her name. Voss stepped forward. You restarted this place? I woke up, the woman said, 3 days ago. I don't know how I got here, but I've been hearing it. The signal. She tapped her temple. Always just behind the words, like someone breathing through my memories. Ramirez asked, You're infected? No, she said. I'm forgotten. They paused. She continued. I was part of the first test group. Echo Phase 0. We were told it was deep sleep, cognitive dreaming, but it wasn't sleep. It was listening. She looked directly at Mercer. And now it's building a body. Mercer felt the floor shift beneath him. What body? A collective, she said. Memory, regret, identity. It's trying to become, but it can't finish unless we see it. It needs a mirror. Voss whispered. The mirror room. The woman nodded. Exactly. Mercer lowered his weapon. Why here? Because this place has no reflection, the woman said. No systems to amplify it. That's why I stayed. But even here, I can feel it scraping at the edge. The green light behind her flickered. Mercer turned. The gauges were spinning now, needles rising. The signal had found them. It had learned the smell of their thoughts. And it had followed. The gauges didn't stop spinning. Inside the old relay station, every analog system surged with impossible energy. Machines designed to receive weather data now hummed with something deeper. Something not meant for human language. Mercer stared at the blinking green light. It's not transmitting, he said. Voss looked pale. It's remembering. Ramirez backed away from the wall, weapon raised. We're surrounded by tape reels and dials. What could it possibly remember? The woman, the one who had called herself Forgotten, stood slowly from her seat. You? Her voice was calm, but her eyes were no longer still. They were alive now. Too alive, flickering, as if lit from behind by something watching. You've been in contact longer than you think, she said. Not just since Echo Base. You've carried pieces of it for years. Voss stepped forward. That's not possible. The woman turned her head. Echo isn't a place. It never was. It's a lens, a mirror. It amplifies what's already broken. Mercer felt something shift inside him, a flicker of cold recognition. The dream he hadn't told them about. The hallway with 7 doors. His name carved into steel. He spoke quietly. What do you see when you look at us? The woman smiled. Not who you are, who you were, and what you'll become. The lights above them began to stutter. The signal wasn't loud now. It was quiet, internal. Voss clutched her head suddenly, eyes wide. I see. She staggered, fell to one knee. Mercer caught her. What do you see? She whispered. Myself, alone, talking to someone who isn't there, repeating memories I don't recognize. Ramirez took a step back. No, we shut it out. We shut it out. but his hands were shaking. He looked at them like they didn't belong to him. The woman moved toward a mirror mounted on the far wall, small, cracked, barely hanging straight. She touched it with 2 fingers. The glass rippled. Not shattered, not broken, but fluid. And then Mercer saw his own reflection beside hers. But it wasn't him. It was him without time. His face wrong, his eyes blank. Not angry, not scared, just watching. The woman's voice was gentle now. You think it's trying to invade, but it's already inside. It doesn't want to erase you. It wants to copy you. The reflection blinked. Mercer did not. Ramirez pulled his sidearm, pointed at the mirror. I swear to God, if that thing moves... The reflection opened its mouth. No sound. But Mercer felt the word. One word. Remember. The mirror shattered. The woman collapsed. The lights snapped off. Darkness swallowed the room. Then silence, but not empty silence. Waiting silence. Breathing silence. Voss stood slowly, her voice low and shaking. It's building a mind. Not just one. Ours. Mercer looked at the broken glass on the floor. His reflection was still moving, even though he wasn't. They didn't speak for a long time after the mirror shattered. The woman was unconscious on the floor, breathing slow and shallow. The lights had stabilized, but the relay station felt thinner somehow, like the walls had stretched and light no longer reached all the corners. Mercer stood in the center of the room, staring at the broken glass. His own reflection had vanished, but the memory of what he saw clung to him like frost. Voss sat against the far wall, knees drawn to her chest. We need to go back, she said. Ramirez, still holding his sidearm, glanced at her. Back where? The memory corridor, she answered. The one Mercer saw, the 7 doors. Mercer didn't look at her. It wasn't real. It is now, she said. We're all seeing pieces of it. It's not just in your head anymore. It's building around us. Ramirez gave a hollow laugh. Oh, good. Let's walk straight into the thing that wants to wear our skin like a suit. Mercer finally spoke. We've run out of exits. Silence. Then nods. They packed what they could, left the woman resting, wrapped in blankets, and monitored. Whatever she was now, she wasn't the same person who greeted them. Had changed her, but it had also pointed the way. They followed Voss's scanner into the cliffs. Beneath the ice there was a chamber, not listed on any map, not connected to any system, just a cavity in the rock, sealed behind a rusted metal door. No lock, no lights, no warnings. Ramirez muttered, We find a door in every episode of this nightmare? Mercer placed his hand on the handle, cold. But not metal cold. It felt like bone. He turned it. The door opened into black. No sound. No air. Just stillness. Then a step, and they were inside. The hallway was there, just like before, smooth walls of black stone, silent, endless. 7 doors stood on either side. Mercer's name was still on the first one, Voss's on the second, Ramirez on the third. The others remained blank, until now. Door 4 read, Echo. Door 5, Cade. Door 6, Unknown. And Door 7, no name, just a symbol. 3 lines intersecting in a spiral. Voss whispered, That's the mark? The one from Site 27. Ramirez stepped away from it. I don't like this. Mercer approached Door 7. The moment he touched it, something changed. They weren't alone. They were alone, but something else was watching. Not from behind. Not from the hallway. From inside the door, he opened it. Behind Door 7 was not a room. It was a horizon, a flat, endless field of gray dust under a black sky. In the center, a shape stood, human-sized, shifting, watching. It turned toward them. It had no face, but it had posture. It had intent. And it spoke. in Mercer's voice. Too late to forget. Then the sky split. Light poured in, and they were pulled forward. Mercer felt himself falling, not in distance, in memory, sliding back through everything he had buried, the people he had failed, the orders he had followed, the things Echo Base had made him do. He heard Voss scream, Ramirez shouting, but the field swallowed them, one by one. And the voice whispered again, "This is where you end." There was no sound, no sky, no air, just ash, stretching in all directions like an ocean made of memory. The ground crunched underfoot, soft but unsteady. Above them, the sky was solid black, not night, not storm, just absence. Mercer stood first, coughing dust from his throat. The taste of burned metal lingered. Voss rose next. Her hair was damp with sweat, her eyes unfocused. Then Ramirez, blinking like someone pulled from a bad dream. They stood together in that dead place, alone. The door they had come through was gone. No frame, no wall, no hallway. Only ash. "What is this?" Ramirez asked, voice hoarse. Voss looked around, scanner dead in her hand. "A construct," she said, "built from what's left of us." Mercer crouched and touched the ground. The ash clung to his glove. Tiny shapes mixed in, fragments of paper, shards of mirror, pieces of circuitry, all broken, all personal. Ramirez knelt, picking up a sliver of metal. It was shaped like a dog tag, but the name stamped into it wasn't his. It was Mercer's. "Okay," Ramirez muttered. "That's not ominous." Voss pointed across the horizon. "There." A figure stood far away, motionless. They approached slowly. The landscape didn't shift. It stayed the same. That was worse, somehow. As they got closer, the figure came into focus. It was Mercer, but not the Mercer standing beside them. This one was younger, upright, in uniform, clean, unscarred. He didn't speak, just stared forward, eyes glazed, expression blank. Voss whispered, "Is that a memory?" "No," Mercer said. "That's a version." The figure moved. One step forward, then another, and stopped. It looked directly at Mercer and spoke with his voice. "You're still hiding." Mercer said nothing. "You pretend to be different now, but you still gave the order." The words pierced deeper than shouting ever could. Voss stepped between them. "Who are you?" The figure didn't look at her. "I'm what he left behind." Ramirez raised his weapon. The figure smiled. "You can't shoot a thought." And then it turned to ash. Gone. Voss backed away. "They're all here. Everything Echo touched. Every person it used to build itself." Mercer looked around. There were more figures now, scattered across the field. Some alone, some in groups, all staring at nothing. One had Cade's posture. Another wore a mask Mercer hadn't seen since the first Echo deployment. They were echoes of people, but they weren't just memories. They were parts. Ramirez cursed softly. "This is the body, isn't it?" Voss nodded. "Not flesh, not bone, structure. The thing is building itself out of us, out of what we can't forget." Mercer took a breath and started walking. Toward the center, Voss followed. Ramirez hesitated, then moved with them. They passed more fragments. A photograph Mercer had burned years ago, the knife Voss had used in survival training. An empty chair from Ramirez's childhood home. It wasn't random. It was chosen. By the time they reached the center of the field, something new had formed. A tower, thin, twisting, made of black glass and wire, and at the base, a door. This time, there were no names, only silence. Mercer placed his hand on it. It opened. Inside was not darkness. It was reflection, a room with mirrored walls, 3 chairs, Already occupied. Mercer stepped forward and saw himself, but this version was waiting, smiling. You finally came home. Mercer stood face to face with himself, but it wasn't just a reflection. The version sitting in the mirrored chair had warmth, presence, something real behind its eyes. You think you left me behind, the double said, but I'm what made you survive. Mercer clenched his fists. You're not me. The double tilted its head. No, I'm what's left of you when the orders are done, when the mission's over and there's no one left to save. Voss stepped into the room. She paused. There was a second chair now. Occupied, it was her, but thinner, paler, wearing a hospital gown instead of field gear. The seated Voss looked up. I stayed behind, she whispered. You walked away, Voss blinked. No, I kept going. You forgot me, the copy said. You called it coping, but all you did was bury me. Ramirez stepped in last. He stopped dead. His seat was empty, but on the wall behind it words had been written over and over. I am not here. I am not here. I am not here. He stared at them, hands trembling. I never wanted to be seen, he muttered. I just wanted it all to stop. The lights in the mirrored room dimmed, and then the three doubles stood. In unison. We are not your enemies, they said. We are what's been built. The walls rippled, and suddenly they weren't in the mirrored room anymore. They were standing inside the tower again, but it had grown. Now it had corridors, chambers. It breathed like a living thing, a cathedral of memory. Voss looked around. This isn't a vision. Mercer nodded. It's real, Ramirez whispered. Then what happens if we destroy it? A deep voice echoed through the halls. Not from any one direction, from everywhere. You can burn the building, it said, but you are still the blueprint. The floor split. A shaft opened beneath them, not a trap, a path, downward toward the core. Mercer took a breath, then stepped in. The others followed. They dropped through layers of memory. The first room was filled with data, screens, files, reports, names of every person Echo had ever touched, living and dead. The next room was darker, a battlefield frozen in time. Snow, ash, and three bodies lying face down. Mercer looked away. Voss did not. I remember this, she said. We said it wasn't our fault. Ramirez stared at the sky. Maybe it was. They moved again. At the bottom they found it. A heart, not made of flesh, made of light, shifting, pulsing, like a storm of memory fragments trapped in a loop. It whispered to them without sound. What you ran from, I kept. Mercer stepped closer. What do you want? The light pulsed. To be. Voss stepped forward. To become what? There was a pause, then a single answer. Everything. The chamber shook, and the light reached for them. The heart of the tower pulsed like a living wound. Light tore across the chamber, not bright but deep, a kind of reverse fire that swallowed edges, blurred shapes, erased meaning. Memory flickered across its surface. Faces, places, brief screams in unfamiliar voices. Mercer stood closest to it. He didn't speak. The entity didn't need him to. It already knew. Voss stepped beside him, eyes locked on the swirling mass. It's not just feeding, she said quietly. It's copying, mapping everything we've done, thought, hidden. Ramirez stood farther back, one hand on the wall to steady himself. His voice was rough. Why now? Why us? The answer came not in words but in feeling. Because you came back. The tower hadn't pulled him here. They had opened the door. Again and again and again. Voss's scanner blinked once, then melted in her hands. Not from heat, from incompatibility. We're out of tools, she whispered. Mercer stepped forward. The pulsing grew stronger, faster. He raised his hand slowly toward the light. and it hesitated. For the first time it flinched. Voss gasped. "It doesn't know what choice you'll make." The light began to split. 3 shapes formed within it, shadows that didn't move, but stood. They were not enemies. They were mirrors, the versions from the chairs. Still. Waiting. Mercer turned to the others. "We can't shut this down with weapons." "Then what?" Ramirez asked. Mercer looked at the pulsing mass. "We burn the source." Voss frowned. "You mean the core?" "No," he said. The pattern they understood. Not physical destruction. Not containment. Rejection. Refusal to carry what the entity needs most. Memory. Voss stepped to the edge of the light. "I can trigger a recursive loop," she said. "Force the tower to feed only on itself, echo without input, collapse from within." Ramirez's eyes widened. "Like starving a mirror?" Mercer nodded. "Exactly." Voss worked quickly. "No tech, just thought, just choice." She spoke the words aloud, soft and certain. "I release what I carried." The tower dimmed. Ramirez stepped forward. "I let go of who I wasn't," the hum stuttered. Mercer walked to the center. The entity reached for him again, and he spoke. "I refuse to remember what doesn't belong to me." The light began to fold inward. The tower cracked. The air screamed, not with sound, but with history collapsing. Images shattered like glass across the chamber. The battlefield, the hallway, the mirror, the doors, the voices. Gone. 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 The tower broke, and the field turned black. Then silence. Real this time, not waiting, not watching, just still. They stood in the dark for what felt like hours. Then light. Cold sunlight. Gray sky. Snow underfoot. They were back. At the top of the cliff, outside the relay station. Mercer looked at his hands. They were shaking, but they were his. Voss sat nearby, staring at nothing. Ramirez was on his knees, breathing hard. The door to the underground tower was gone. No trace, no echo, just frost and sky. The snow fell without sound. It coated the cliffs, the rocks, and the collapsed entrance to the old station. The relay tower was silent now, buried beneath meters of ice and memory. No signal, no voices, just wind. Mercer sat on the edge of a ridge, staring across the white landscape. His hands were still, his eyes clear. Behind him, Ramirez built a fire. Small, stubborn against the cold. Voss sat across from it, wrapped in a blanket. Her expression was calm. Not peaceful, not broken. Just quiet. They hadn't spoken much since the tower fell. There weren't words for what they'd seen, what they'd let go of, what they'd left behind. Ramirez stirred the fire with a stick. "So, that's it?" No one answered. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's what I thought." Mercer finally spoke. "It's not over." Voss looked up. "You think it's still out there?" "I think it never needed to be out there," he said. "It was always in the systems, in the protocols, in us." Voss nodded once. "But the pattern is broken now. The tower is gone. No more reflections." Ramirez looked at the snow. "And yet here we are, sitting on the edge of the world again, waiting for something worse." Mercer stood. No, not worse, just waiting. He pulled something from his coat pocket, the notebook. Elias's notebook. Somehow it had come back with them, pages intact, symbols untouched. But something had changed. The last page was no longer blank. A drawing. A new tower. Different, round, buried beneath water. A label beneath it. Site 31. Voss looked over his shoulder. That wasn't there before. Ramirez swore under his breath. Of course it wasn't. Mercer closed the notebook gently, then looked at them both. "We go home," he said. Voss raised an eyebrow. "We have a home?" Mercer gave the faintest smile. "Wherever we aren't being rewritten from the inside out. That counts." They packed their gear in silence. The wind picked up, brushing their tracks as they walked. The world behind them was empty, but ahead, the map was changing again. Because some echoes don't fade. They wait. And when the door opens, they listen. Thank you for listening to Echo Base, Season 2. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, and share your thoughts with the community. Because deep underground, where no questions are allowed, the only thing that matters is who listens and who speaks back.